Of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
How often have you found yourself scrolling through social media, getting hypnotized by short videos, and searching for answers to validate your thoughts and experience?
I read all of the data and all of the articles on this subject. Now I'm an expert?
That doesn't make me an expert.
It is easy to get caught up in the era of information and AIs, where we can get a little overloaded with data that may be misleading or difficult to understand. Having a degree in your area of expertise is certainly necessary, but does not mean you are free of bias.
This is a vitamin juice-esque potion.
What does it do exactly?
It fixes it.
In the field of health, we have seen a surge of self-proclaimed experts who lack proper education or credentials. While some of these individuals may have good intentions, the potential risk of relying on unqualified advice might be significant. The prevalence of bias in nutrition research and education also raises a lot of questions about the truth of professionals and their degrees. So who and what we should or not trust? To answer this question today and a couple others, I brought to today's story a man who don't want your trust, but your attention. Dr. Carvalho is a MD, PhD in biology that has published peer-reviewed medical research in nutrition, behavior, aging, and much more. Also a great YouTuber with a very interesting channel. He's not here to make you believe on his ideals and to trust him, but to translate to you what the data shows. Why they shouldn't trust you and anyone else but the data.
I like to say in my videos that trust is for friends and family, right? Trust is how you build emotion-based relationship. In science, you don't usually go by trust, or as little as you can. And by default, a scientific mindset is built on skepticism. So you want to see verification, you want to see reproducibility, test the idea in multiple different complementary ways, and you want to keep confirming that it's likely true or that it's not.
In scientific research, data is what matters, and academic journals are the most credible sources available out there. PubMed, for instance, is the databases where you can find these studies. It's like the Google version for academic research.
And I think this is a healthy mindset. It's not about not trusting a message the first time you hear it. It's not an insult to somebody. I think it's a good default mindset, especially when we're talking about factual or scientific topics. It doesn't mean that somebody is lying or dishonest. It just means that things are complex and we want to see repetition and validation in order to take risks and to bet our lives and our health on knowledge and ideas.
Truly believe that people, they're not just looking for the answer, but someone to validate the answer. Do you think people tend to believe others just by the way they talk, deliver information, and sometimes the number of followers? It doesn't matter how accurate you are, more the way you're introducing, communicating with the public, and how strong you are in the social media. My question could be applied to those creating the guidelines. How far these institutions are willing to keep their principles, or will money buy their fight?
It definitely has an effect. I think when you're talking about thousands or even millions of people, there's obvious heterogeneity. So there's going to be people who are more information centered, and there's people who are going to be more focused on what the person looks like or how they sound or how they move. You know, there's going to be all kinds of channels, but there's no doubt that how you communicate is going to have an effect.
Bland, plant-based gruel. They've tipped milk all over the floor.
I asked 20 doctors from YouTube to tell me which organ in the body is their favorite.
To take one example that was particularly poignant for my family, heart disease.
But those are factors that, especially the number of followers, there's larger accounts can be wrong and smaller accounts can be right. It's a surrogate. It's a shortcut that people use because they are exposed to all this seemingly contradictory information, and they have to find a way to decide.
And they ended up facing some professionals that they are really good communicating the information. They're really good introducing the information for the public. When you're going to check the background of that person, they don't have the background in nutrition in general. Second, if anyone can just read studies and become a professional about the topic, then anyone can do it, which leads me to my next question. When it comes to nutrition and health information, what they can do, since there is so much out there, so many people saying they are the professionals, they are the expert, how the general public that they have no background in science and cannot read data like we do, what would you tell them to do?
There are some introductory validation steps that anyone can take that don't even take that long. So first step would be just, is evidence presented? Which sounds even dumb to say that. It sounds like, well, everything should... You'd be surprised. Most content and most people making claims on scientific topics on social media don't show any evidence for it. They just say, this is a superfood, that's a toxic food. If you eat this thing, you'll grow wings and you'll be able to fly.
Warning, some of those labels can be misleading.
A vegan diet can help you achieve your goals.
There are any risks to eating animal foods exclusively. There are no risks in terms of kidney function. There are...
The reason no evidence is shown is because it's still enough to just make the claims, and there's enough people that will just hear that and go, okay, well, this person is a doctor. I guess they should know what they're talking about. But so that would be the first level. If no evidence is shown, this is called the Hitchens razor. A claim made with no evidence can be dismissed with no evidence. It's like reading Harry Potter. You can't tell what's fantasy and what's reality.
As well as we can't trust every professional and organizations, we can trust every study published. Seeking for those with a proven track record of producing accurate and unbiased data is a possibility, but making your own research is definitely necessary.
Second step, if people show evidence, just take a look at the study. Is it a study in humans? Even without reading the whole thing. Oftentimes, just by the title, by the blurb, by the abstract, you can tell if it supports the claim made.
How important do you think context is when explaining data? People tend to ask very general questions. Is milk good for you? Is this bad for you? My answer is always, it depends who you are. Milk can be good for you, but if you're allergic to lactose, it's going to be not good for you. So what works for one person may not work for another. And it is important to take individual differences into account when making decisions about nutrition and health. This is where qualified professionals can especially be helpful, as they can provide personalized guidance and support.
You're right. Those questions come up all the time, and those are the answers that people want. People want to know, are eggs good or bad? And the reality is you can't answer a question like that at that level with any scientific substance. Yeah, you can tell people eggs are bad no matter what, or eggs are a superfood, everybody should be having them. Yeah, you can find that type of messaging. And what you find when you dig just a millimeter below the surface is they're not sure what they mean, and they aren't representing the totality of the scientific evidence. That's the only way you can answer a question like that with yes or no. When you add too much nuance, you lose your audience. Too much information and too much qualification and too many maybes, and you lose people. And what's catchy is precisely the yes or no, all or nothing. That's catchy and easy to remember. I'm not saying I'm the master of that. It's an ongoing process. We're to provide a bit of nuance and a bit of context without boring the person and without completely losing them.
Do you believe that in the field of nutrition and health, people are always looking for the objective truth, or are they open-minded to change?
I think there's a little bit of everything. There's a lot of heterogeneity at the level of what people are looking for, their past experience. There are people who have found maybe a diet that they like, or a diet that makes them feel better, and they are not interested in anything that differs from that. That's their right to stick with what they like. Similarly, there's a lot of people who hold very strong views, but are very open to contrary, not just opinions, but contrary evidence. We get that all the time. Even people who at first disliked the content, and they say, look, the first time I saw your videos, I hated it because everything you said was the opposite of what I had heard before. And I thumbed down every video, but I just kept watching and I understood, and I little by little looked at the evidence, and now I see what you're trying to say. This happens all the time. 10 or 20% of people who, no matter what you say, their mind is made up. They don't care what you have to show them, and that's fine. That's not your target audience. On the other end, maybe 10 or 20% of people who love everything I say, but I'm also not helping them very much, right? They already believe the same things, or they already know what we're showing them. But then you have 80% of people in the middle who are open to evidence, who are open to changing their views. And I think that's where the attention and the focus is people who are, just show me the information. Just tell me something that makes sense. Don't treat me like a child. Let me make my own decisions, but show me the information.
So I guess it's not just a matter of where the information came from, but how open you are to accept the facts and deny the fiction.
Oftentimes, when you start making content on the internet, people can sometimes worry about disagreement. They worry about opposition, right? People who don't agree, or people who are rude, or something like that. This is what concerns creators in the beginning. But with something scientific, I'm not worried about people who find us and who disagree or who have different views. We encourage people to challenge us. We encourage people to have intelligent disagreement and to link references and to say, look, I'm not sure about this because I heard this other thing. Here's another study that I saw. How do you reconcile this with what you said? That's exactly the right process.
What are some of the biggest challenges and obstacles that you see in the field of nutrition and health today? Health in general, the health field, nutrition field, and how can we overcome them? Not just as our public watching us, but other health professionals?
I think by far the biggest challenge is implementation, because as much as we talk about confusion and we talk about contradictory messages and all this, if you go down the street and you ask people simple overarching questions about nutrition, most people are going to give you answers that are in general alignment with the science. In terms of, if you ask people, okay, eating cookies and crackers all day long, is that healthy or unhealthy? Eating salads, is that healthy or unhealthy? Are the answers going to be very simplistic? Yes. But is it going to be generally in the right direction? Yeah, for most people it is.
You were giving advice to a diabetic. Would you tell him to eat more vegetables, more fruits, or they're both equally good?
I'd probably tell them to eat more fruits.
This is 2% milk. What does the 2% number represent?
2% of how much dairy is in it? 2% lactate.
So the biggest problem we have is implementation, is how the ideas that are already out there are not being implemented in daily life for most people, at least in the Western world. The average American is getting almost 60% of their calories from ultra-processed foods, from junk food. And that number is going up every year by about 1%. So that's the biggest issue. We can talk about meta-analyses and bar graphs and p-values all day long, but what our factors is, what am I used to eating? What do I like eating? What do my friends eat? What's cheap? What can I access?
Why do you think there's so many people that are still consuming those bad types of food? Even if you have so many health experts out there and people introducing new data to social media, these people have access to this, but why do you think this is increasing?
Because decisions are governed by a lot more than just rational factors. There are constraints like financial constraints and access constraints and ease and speed constraints that determine what a lot of people can and do end up eating. Even if you, in the back of your mind, know that a salad would be healthier than a McDonald's hamburger, the fact that you can get a McDonald's fast, that it's cheap, that it fills you up, that you like the taste, that you've been eating it your whole life, that your family and friends eat it, all of those factors come together when it's time to sit down at the table.
Looking ahead, the field of nutrition and health is likely to continue evolving in exciting ways. However, it is important to approach these developments with critical eye and to stay informed about the latest research and trends. How do you see nutrition and health evolving in the next coming years? What do you think will be some of the biggest trends or developments that people should watch out for?
Microbiome is one field where there's been an explosion of findings over the last decade or two.
Research shows that the gut microbiome affects a lot of how we experience our daily lives. Emotions, weight, brain functioning, even our food choices. But how does it work?
Gastrointestinal disease, intolerances, some of it isn't understood. A lot of it is understood, but isn't quite getting to the public for different reasons. Cardiovascular disease, you got to bring it up because it's the #1 cause of death, remains the #1 likely reason we and our family members and our friends are going to die is cardiovascular disease, even though the basic factors have been understood for a long time, and it can largely be prevented. For most people, there's simple lifestyle tweaks that can enormously modulate your risk.
Why do you think still health professionals and doctors mostly not aware, or if they are not implementing these techniques? You see a patient with a very high blood pressure, and nutrition is not even mentioned.
I think it's a few factors, but it goes back to training. Doctors have received very little training as far as nutrition and lifestyle. I went to medical school, and I'll be the first one to say we hear very little about it. It's an afterthought.
According to Stanford University, doctors have historically received almost no nutrition training, fewer than 20 hours.
Another problem, institutional, because the medical appointments are often very short. You have a few minutes to talk to each patient, and so you pretty much get the symptoms, you diagnose, and you prescribe something, and it's kind of almost this cookie cutter process. And lifestyle, although it's very powerful, takes time. You have to really explain things. You have to give examples. Doctors will give kind of boilerplate advice. And we get a lot of complaints from viewers like, my doctor told me to eat the pyramid, and they told me to eat the fruits and vegetables, and it didn't work for me. A lot of times it's because not enough detail and not enough explanation was given. Registered dietitians, on the other hand, are the people who are trained to convey dietary advice, nutrition advice. Many people don't go to a dietitian. They go to their doctor and they expect nutrition advice. I think there should be more training in medical school. Doctors should get a lot more basic training in nutrition, but also I think doctors should work with registered dietitians more closely. And there should be a pattern of referring patients to registered dietitians. It should be almost a part of the process.
Imagine you have a big board and 8 billion people have access to that big board, and they can see one message that you want to tell them. They're going to see and they're going to reflect about it. What would you tell them?
Subscribe to Nutrition Made Simple. No, just kidding. It would be something about replacing ultra-processed foods with whole food versions that are pleasurable enough that you can sustain that long term. Like, not necessarily try to lose the 5 pounds by the summer or something like that, or these fad diets that you lose a little bit of weight. Focus on something that you think you can hold for 20 years and that you enjoy enough that you can hold for 20 years, that it's not this chore, right? I think that's a more productive focus than the, how do I lose the 5 pounds? Or how do I got this pain. I just want this pain to go away. I understand the focus on that, and that's totally important. But overarching, I think focusing on how to avoid problems in the long run and how to optimize your health globally.
The best diet that works for you, the best diet out there is the diet that you can do it, is the sustainable diet.
No diet works if you can't actually do it.